is this person who had such kind of mana or charisma or shamanic emphasis that she's buried by herself outside the walls of the community, and all of these artifacts of this clay were found there, and they did the chemical analysis and discovered that the mixture was perfectly consciously arranged so that when these are stuck in the fire they explode. They come to a point so they can be daggered into the hearth, so it's like a hearth goddess, and then with the right temperature in the fire they explode for whatever poetic reason, whether the cracks are like bone oracles in the Proto-I Ching or what is anybody's good guess. Here are these necklaces that again emphasize the breasts and are worn as pendants and are images of the Great Mother, the vulva. But the intriguing thing, next slide, is how when you look at many of these, they have this that has not, to my knowledge, been emphasized that much. Maria Gimbutas talked about the phallic neck goddess, but the way in which these are both male and female together has been, I think, overlooked. Next slide. When you actually look at this goddess of Willendorf from the top, it has a phallic quality, and these unnaturally thin hands on top her breasts are obviously not realistic hands, but the rendering of the line makes each breast look as much like the glans penis as the breast itself. Next slide. When you look at the back, and you can look at this statue in the break, because it's here, I brought it from Paris, from the Louvre. Obviously, these lines, this is obviously not legs from the backside, and so it has this Henry Moore, Jacques Lipschitz dimorphic quality, where the male genitalia are implicit in the body of the Great Mother. The phallus belongs to the Great Mother. It's implicate in her body, and so the phallus is not itself a separated function. It's the property of the great goddess. Next slide. Now here we come much later. We've just jumped into the Neolithic, but here this Maria in her book, The Civilization of the Goddess, Maria Gimbutas, talks about these phallic-necked goddesses. So they have this understanding of how the sexes are really together. And of course, if you're a medical doctor, you know that the labia majora and the scrotum are basically the same skin, and that the male is just a female with just a little English put in chromosomally at the end to just give it a little spin into differentiation, and that the penis is just a clitoris suffering from delusions of grandeur. Now here's what they call fertility goddess. This was from Tepe Sarab and is from out of the Scientific American. But here you see very much the dimorphic quality where it's both male and female, and here the breasts are very clearly rendered to look like the heads of penises. And when you come up in the literature and start reading the love cycle of Inanna and Dumuzi, there is this constant homology between milk and cream and butter and cheese and semen and milk, and so the penis gives the milk of cream, and the breast gives the milk of lactation, and they're all involved with this celebration of sexuality and food. So that this crossing that you can see carrying on for 20,000 years of art form gets rendered literally into the world's first erotic poetry in the Sumerian love cycle of Inanna and Dumuzi that you have in Diane Volkstein's book Inanna. Next slide. Here, sometimes the goddess is rendered actually in a form that is where the whole body itself is phallic. It says basically phallic shape. And the next slide. Now, Maria also talks about, as does André Leroy-Guérin in his Prehistory of Occidental Art, how that the images of the male tend to be very stylized and sometimes are what are called the wounded man theme, or the sorrowful ancient one. And so there is this prehistory of the images of the male being one who is performing the temporality of death and vanishing. And the great goddess is performing the archetype of endurance. So if you go all the way up into Anaximander, when he says the unlimited, the Epeiron, is the source from which all things derive, and which things must return and pay back to the unlimited for the crime of their existence according to necessity and the arrangement of time. If you translate that into a pyrrhon into the Great Mother, and the thing into the male, you'll begin to be able to see how Greek philosophy secularized and conceptualized this kind of matrix, literally, of a cosmology that's the first cosmology, the cosmology of our first universal religion, and that what this is all about are images of the male as vanishing and the dying creature and the woman as the enduring one. And it's a mistake to think of it that women are killing men and that women are evil Amazon bitches trying out to kill us. They're performing the aspect of continuity, and we're performing the aspect of the sharp crispness of individuation and vanishing time, which is, of course, what I showed you in the film of Lynn Margulis's Bacteriology, where this dynamic little spunky spirochete is flagellating and moving about, and the enormous ovum or the enormous protist is huge and colossal and enduring, and the act of conception is perishing into her eternity as you throw your genes in her direction, and she opens up and throws half of her genes away to make the dialogue possible. So that acceleration of time is what sex is all about, but the cosmology at the dawn of time is one very much where the male is the vanishing male, the dying Christ. Next slide, please. The ambiguity of the kind of infantile relationship that I was talking about in Proust, you can see, is extremely archetypal, because here is the Neolithic statue where nursing is rendered in the position of coitus. And so you have this whole sense that the male is dwarfed by the erotic power of the female. Next slide. Here you see the male emerging between, this is Çatalhöyük, emerging between the thighs of the Great Mother, and then he flourishes for a little season. Next slide. Here you see again this Henry Moore form of the lovers and the infantile relationship at the breast and the copulating lovers. Next slide. This is the male that then is no longer the implicate phallus of the Paleolithic, but begins to be a character with a distinct statuary life of his own, but he's buried in the vulture shrine of death next to the old hag or crone of death. So again, whether it's Adonis or Dumuzi, the prehistory of this early religion is one in which the male is the vanishing dynamical principle, and the Great Mother is the universal basin of all attractions. So what you get in this shift, and then I'll end it, we can have questions, and have a break, and then we'll have questions. In this progression, we have the forest, the glacial, and then the riverine when we come to Sumer. In each of these cultural ecologies, there is a kind of articulation of imagery in which there's continuity, but there begins to be also enormous difference in the. And I think I'll save my discussion about the riverine for next week and do the riverine in the modern to discuss the shift in mathematics that goes along with this imagery, because what I'm basically going to be doing in these talks is to show how culture is deeply embedded in a cultural ecology, and as we move through this progression from, say, riverine to Mediterranean to Atlantic to biospheric, each of those mentalities, each of those cultural ecologies has a distinct mentality in which there is a world narrative for literature and mathematics. And as we progress through these cultural ecologies, we're also progressing from the arithmetic to the geometrical to the Galilean dynamical and calculus of infinitesimals and science of motion to the chaos dynamical or morphological one that we're in now. And so each of these is a transformation in our mathematical topological imagination, but one that's deeply wed to literature and myth and story. And so it's definitely, C.P. Snow's thing about two cultures is just dead wrong. They're not two cultures of science and the humanities, and they, at every creative period in time, whether it's the Renaissance or now, poets and scientists are always hanging out and stimulating one another's imaginations. Each of these cultural ecologies is characterized by a mentality, and then the dynamics of articulation by which a mentality comes forth is also biologically characterized in terms of formative work or text, dominant, and climactic. And you'll recognize even in that rhythm a kind of Goethean science biological metaphor. So for the riverine in the Mesopotamian Sumer, the formative text of the arithmetic mentality would be how Inanna transferred the maze, the software program for civilization, from Eridu to Eresh to Uruk. And the dominant text in the shift from sort of erotic folk songs to priestcraft is Inanna's descent into the netherworld, which sets the pattern for the descent in the netherworld for literature all the way through Odysseus, Aeneas, Christ's harrowing of hell, and the Gospel of Nicodemus. Originally, the descent is by a woman, and then it gets in patriarchy reconstructed by Christ making the descent. And then the climactic work that finishes the mentality so there's no place to go, it's the primary document for all time of the lament of the dying male is the Gilgamesh epic. So if you want to, those of you who are in the class here, if you want to study sort of literature and the evolution of consciousness, then you can just focus on that kind of phenomenology and just read in Diane Volkstein's Inanna, the erotic poetry of the love song of Inanna and Dumuzi, and then the Inanna's descent into the netherworld, and then the climactic Gilgamesh epic. And I'm going to be tracing that dynamic through all of the mentalities from Sumer to Finnegan's Wake and the Tarkovsky, Lem, Solaris, and my own poetry. My basic work, I guess, in this course is just rationalizing my own role as a writer. I'm reconstructing my tradition, and so this very long course on literature and the evolution of consciousness is really a kind of explication of imaginary landscape and the poem cycle at the end of it. Okay, what do you want?